Thank you and good morning. Can you hear me? This is the worst part of being a speaker is all the weird stuff that happens right before you go live. This should be a SANS class for dealing with presentations because even though you might be an expert or know what you're doing, technically, I don't have a home setup, I don't broadcast, so I appreciate everyone here getting this working, and thank you for coming out. Thank you to the volunteers who organize the BSides conferences. They don't run without the volunteers, and truly appreciate the time and effort they put in year-round to make these 2 days, 3 days work. So this talk is the compromised Conti chats and carving those with the analytical mindset of an intelligence analyst. It's not going to be as technical as some of the other talks at the workshops yesterday. This is more of a framework with international affairs than a deep dive into hacking O365. So I'm Will Baggett. Certification is a Certified Combat Collection Engineer and Certified Fraud Examiner. I picked the one certification up when I was teaching NATO Special Ops cybersecurity on how to exploit battlefield finds digitally, doing forensics on those. But you didn't come to hear about me, you came to hear the talk. We're going to cover Russian ransomware group Conti, Russian-Ukrainian cyber warfare, the insider threat overview, that's a very esoteric but necessary part of cybersecurity, and then the Carver analysis method that I applied to the leaked Conti chats. Again, being a former instructor for NATO, I would have 40 hours in a week to train the troops on the cybersecurity issues. The red slides are where it'd be if theoretically we had the time, we'd go to an exercise and have hands-on learning. The yellow slides are things that were learned well after the triage of the data. But again, I've got 15 minutes, not 40 hours. I am limited by the technology of my time. So ransomware, it's kind of dropped off a little bit. I know John Hammond gave a fantastic talk last year on the methods to distribute ransomware through backup servers. It's a fascinating thing, very timely. Ransomware is not the event that happens when you click on the link and it locks up your system for money. There's a lot of recon that goes into it beforehand. They'll, much like a red team, they'll look for sensitive data, the amount of money that a corporation can repay. If a corporation has no cyber insurance, no funding, it doesn't make sense for the ransomware group to go after the target and hold the data for money they'll never get. Variation on that we saw during the Russian conflict with Ukraine was wiperware. It's a little bit like a modified EMP, electromagnetic pulse delivery system, where instead of locking the data, it just remotely wipes the machine. Whereas that is a horrible event for us who are in system administration. That's still far better having your system wiped than having your building blown up. So that's a little bit of the overview, but who is Conti? They're a Russian-based ransomware group. They were previously past tense in operation up until 2022. They would extract the data, and if it hit the criteria, they had consultants to go over the data to tell them what was valuable and how much they could get. They would name the client and shame them if they didn't pay the data. Hey, I realize I'm overseas. I don't need to shame any US corporations. Corporation X won't pay us. They have your data. It's being leaked out. So then you get to a different version of finding your data on have I been pwned. Later it was determined that the ransomware group was part of the Russian government for fundraising. It was a big business, $180 million per year up until this leak occurred. This insider threat did take down the whole organization. $180 million, pretty much tax-free because you're a criminal group working with the Russian government. That's not bad money. I don't know if you get SANS training out of that or not, but that's not inconsequential for a small startup. They use that standard operating procedure. They'll identify a compromised account, get someone to click on a link. Once they have access, they'll set up a domain server, a C2, exfil the data, SOP, right? And then once they have the data, the very last step is they deploy the ransomware. A little bit of historical background. In May 2021, Colonial Pipeline. Realize that was not an issue down here, but for those of us on the eastern seaboard of the United States, Colonial Pipeline was taken down by DarkSide ransomware. They took down the billing server for Colonial Pipeline, which shut down the entire pipeline delivering petroleum to the eastern half of the United States. If anyone was up there, it was pretty brutal. I've got a Jeep that gets about 15 miles to the gallon, and not being able to get gas was a event, to be nice. They deployed the ransomware through phishing. Click here for the full power of DarkSide. Again, phishing is usually the main way that a ransomware group is going to penetrate your organization. So giving a little bit of background as we build up to what this event actually happened. So May 2021, February of 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. But before that, there had been some interesting cyber warfare tactics deployed by both sides. There are some interesting SIGINT, OSINT events, some disinformation campaigns that are very effective. No loss of life, which is not bad, but for those of us in the cyber domain, these are definitely things to pay attention to. Things you wouldn't think you'd have to tell people, such as, hey, don't take your cell phone into combat, and don't turn on Tinder while you're in combat on the Russian border and match with locals. Hot Russian women are not lady, it's Ivan, and he's sucking down your information to manipulate you later to see where your troop movements are going. But again, not everyone is on the same level technically as those of us in the room, and if you don't tell people, they won't know it's a bad thing to do. 2014, again, the age of AI now in 2024, this is relatively trivial. Ukrainian troops landed near the Russian border, and they received text messages en masse, the whole unit did, saying you are going to be shelled. Concurrently, the parents of those troops also got text messages saying your son just died in combat, which now triangulates the troop where they're located, and then the movement they take for exfiltration and evacuation off the X. So you have a combination of electronic warfare, signals intelligence collection, HUMINT collection, and OSINT collection all delivered at once en masse. This is phenomenal from a pure technical point of view because it did work. It got the troops away from the border. Ukraine, also not a slacker of a country, they claimed they had a list of all the Russian spies operating in all of Europe. They released the names, addresses, SIM cards of all the Russian diplomats in Europe. So every single person who worked for the Russian government was now claimed to be FSB or KGB. What that's going to do is isolate, if you're just working with a regular individual, but now there's the taint that they're a Russian officer collecting intelligence on your country, you won't want anything to do with them. They've been essentially persona non grata, PNG'd. It's frozen the entire Russian collection network in all of Europe. Fantastic move. I salute them for that. But there's been games back and forth. Now, again, if we were in class, we'd pivot over to laptops, desktops. We could do some things like Bellingcat to find where two Russians under tourist cover left Moscow, flew to Europe, flew to UK to go see a chapel in Birmingham, or I forget which city, but to go see a chapel for a day, and they flew back home. Most government employees don't fly 6 hours to go look at a church and fly back in the same day. They used some polonium, killed a dissident, flew back home, and from these leaks is able to ascertain the identities of the Russians who are committing murder for their country. We could work down this leak again if we had more time, 40 hours to dig through this and show how the smallest leak would take down an organization. But instead, we'll go with a meme of, I'm telling you right now, that Foreign Service officer is not real. One other exercise I did take out because we are international, and I don't want to encourage any crime. One of the slides I took out for this was, it's a beautiful exercise. I would have the troops get online and just search on Twitter, on X, or Facebook for my new debit card, my new passport, my new credit card, and people still post pictures of their credit cards, front and back. They post pictures of their passports or travel orders. And then we would walk backwards to show, here's their flight number, here's their credit card number. Now you pivot over to their registry, you can find out where they live. Now you've got their home phone number. So it's easy to call and say, hey, Ivan, I'm with Aeroflot. Your flight had an issue, we'd like to reimburse you. We just need your bank account number to wire you the money. Now I've got your banking information, and that's where the fraud begins, just from these simple leaks. But again, 50 minutes versus 40 hours. Getting into the meat of the presentation, Russia invades Ukraine, February 2022. This is the first modern invasion, or modern, of two Western countries. Where I'm working, we shifted as a key part of the US economy, we shifted to 24/7 operations for cyber threat intelligence, which on a personal level, being able to walk down 2 flights of stairs at home and actually collect intelligence and report on Russian movements of troops and cyber activities from my freaking basement instead of having to drive into a skiff and then badge in, log into a system, and collect the same data from the same sources, that was different for a lot of us, but it's still the same data. So going back to the ransomware, Conti puts out a notice, we are fully in support of the Russian government and everything they do. All right, yeah, we expected that. Well, 2 hours later, well, we don't really support Russia. We're blah, 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 weasel word, word salad. And they backpedal from what they've done. That is vague and unconvincing. There's something going on for Conti. We're not on the X, but it's now heightened our awareness of what's going on with this ransomware group. So a Ukrainian security researcher, part of the ransomware group, leaked about 60,000 messages that belonged to the ransomware group after the gang sided with Russia over the invasion of Ukraine, 2 slides back, where they said, we're with Russia. The one insider took action on this. He sent out a message saying, I'm releasing this one file. I'm looking at the name here. It's a tar file. We're releasing it. This will be the first of many. More will come. And now the X is on, the Eye of Sauron is on this Twitter account. Again, going back to OPSEC. Usually, my first Twitter account I set up was at Apple headquarters doing digital forensic research with Black Bag. I'm really dating myself with that. And they're now part of Celebrite. One thing we noticed way back was when people would set up alt accounts or sock puppet accounts, generally the amateurs will see the one they're following. Not this case. The first person they follow is their true name account. So don't do that. The second is, I'm not an intelligence officer any longer, unfortunately. The 9,300 followers, who are they? Why are you following this account? You don't have to follow. You can bookmark it in your browser. You don't have to actually put your name out there and following that. These are becoming interesting. They link to anon files. So now on the insider threat side of the house, knowing you've got this cyber warfare games that Ukraine and Russia play with each other, just quick show of hands, would you block anon files from download? Because I don't really, hey, here's something nice and juicy about the Russian-Ukraine conflict, please download it. Comrade, no. Other things to consider. Sure, you've got the retweets, the quotes, the likes, the bookmarks. That doesn't tell the full story of what's going on. Another thing is, tool is still up there. I would go to tinfoleak.com. I would put in the name of the account, put in my personal email or non-work email, because I don't know what's going to come back, and I would get a full result as to the account number, previous names for the account, who's following it, geolocation, alleged geolocations, because those can definitely be spoofed. But you can start to gather more data, and this is a free tool. So again, I get no compensation for this, but tinfoleak.com, that's part of osintframework.com. X1 Discoveries, about $2,000 to $3,000 per year for the similar capability. If your organization is like mine and tooling has become expensive, free is not bad. So that was the first thing I did, was pull the account information, the operation security exercise that we would roll through here. I did leave it in, I'm surprised myself. But again, this is something, y'all are probably going back to your hotel room and do this during the break or at lunch, but people still do that in the year of our Lord 2024. I don't understand it, but that's why I have a job in cyber. So the Conti leaks insider threat began pumping out the leaked files, different variations. And one thing to notice, what does that little graph represent, anyone? That's the number of times the tweet was viewed, not the number of times people liked it, replied to it. You can view it even just going to your web browser and not being logged into Twitter and not leave that footprint. So you can see it was, as the kids would say, doing numbers without having the actual interaction of committing that you're looking at these tweets, which is better tradecraft. Right after these were leaked, we're starting to pick up business. Someone leaked the English version of the Conti leaks. All total, almost 400 JSON files with 61,000 messages. You ever parse through 61,000 chat files? It sucks. I shouldn't say that. My kids might watch this. It's unfortunate. So these conversations of formatting died here. So the conversations contained pretty much everything about the organization. I sent Apple Keynote slides to PowerPoint. My apologies for the formatting on that. So it was their C2, it was their Bitcoin address, their data leaks. It was targets that had been compromised who had made it public for SEC filings in the United States. There's a lot of data in here that wasn't yet public, including their Bitcoin wallets. So again, we would go back. You could trace through osintframework.com, go down to digital currency, go to Bitcoin, and you could begin tracing back to see if you get the names of the operatives who are working with Conti. The data was leaked by a researcher who had access to the full back end of the Jabber database. Conti thought they were a red team pen testing organization. For most people, that was their cover story. They didn't know they were actually working with ransomware. The yellow slides are the slides of historical note. So this is a year and 4 months after the leaks came out. With someone's due diligence, they found leaks, connections between Russia and Conti, which in the first year and a half, that wasn't apparent. You just had time, effort on target to analyze this. As a small cyber threat intelligence team for a large organization, we didn't have the luxury of time. We had other threats to deal with. We didn't have this. But this still shows that the Russian ransomware groups are active and tied to Russia. So a little bit of this has happened. Insider threat, to cover this. Anyone else in here working insider threat? Just me. It's looking, instead of looking for the intrusions from external actors looking to breach your organization, like a SolarWinds or a cloud misconfiguration, your AWS bucket is misconfigured. It's an internal person who leaks it. The easy analogy is a data breach is a dam that has a hole broken into it, whereas an internal leak is someone opening the gate on purpose to let the data out. It only takes one unexpected action to breach an organization, something like Clop or Move It. A little bit older ransomware leak, or SolarWinds. Because no one expects a leak to happen. It only takes one person to lower the defenses, whether it's Edward Snowden, copy and paste. He's not a hacker. He's a SharePoint admin, copy, paste to a thumb drive. Robert Hansen, he worked FBI closely with CIA. He leaked the name of our assets who are working in Moscow. I believe they were mostly put to death by the Russians. Nebula from the Avengers movies. There's evil Nebula, good Nebula. I feel like a teenager up here. She lowered the defenses to bring Thanos in Endgames. And the reason people go for movies in these presentations is because with secrecy agreements and NDAs, we can go with this, we can't discuss real world events. Traditional motivations for espionage are money, ideology, conscience, compromise, ego, or excitement. So the researcher who leaked this data fell into ideology, conscience. I don't know if it was ego. I think it was more of, again, this third-party analysis, but I think it was more of an ideology. My country's being invaded. You're making money off of my country. I'm going to take you down. A little bit more advanced, they taught us it was rascals, reciprocity, authority, scarcity, commitment, liking, social proof, ways to manipulate people to get things to act in your interest. We've seen ransomware groups offer emails to people who are considering leaving companies. They'll get emails saying, if you'll load this ransomware on your organization, we'll give you a cut of the take. And those are also the same elements of phishing emails. So it's manipulation of whether it's one-on-one or whether it's phishing. It's still, how do we get this person to move? This actor moved on his own conscience. The data breach, again, like MGN at Caesar's Palace, this was done by Scattered Spider. But again, it's a little bit different than the insider leak. So this one was a one-time event. He lost access. He quit, leaked the data. They knew who it was. He was the only Ukrainian on the team. There's no hiding that. Directly identified to, again, the one individual. There's no obfuscation. And the damage was unquantifiable. They are offline for good now. So a question I had when I gave the talk to my team, the data was compartmentalized, meaning Group A didn't know what Group B was doing, Group B didn't know what Group C was doing, generally. It was staged in organized files for exfiltration, linked with a very public name. And how would you detect this behavior? Do you have a method in your organization to determine if people are harvesting sensitive data and storing it in a folder before they mail it out? Did he use his Conti laptop to send this out? These weren't small files. So if you have EDR software, endpoint detection software, that would say, hey, Bob is collecting these source code files on his laptop. He's encrypted them. Things like a detect software or maybe SentinelOne would detect his actions beforehand. Did he copy the data to a USB drive? How did he get it out of the organization? What controls do they have for the sensitive data? These are things to consider not just for Conti, but for your organization. Is if they're going to exfiltrate it, there are clear defined steps they're going to do, unless, and this is what people hate, PT Puff put the props up front, just take a screenshot with your phone. We still don't have a method to detect that yet, because now with OCR on the iPhone, I can copy the sensitive data. No one's going to know I've done that. Not that I'm going to do it because I like being employed in this economy, but that's still the one risk that we haven't mitigated. Only thing I can think of, and I would do not condone it, would be have a camera on 24/7. Because I don't want to work having a camera, the ISR on right there watching me work. But there are definitely tells if someone's going to exfiltrate data. So then now what? This is working as a cyber threat manager. We've got this leaked data from an unknown source that may or may not be another method to load malware, ransomware, wiperware. And in talking with friends who are still serving, if there's a battlefield data collection, the ethereal, they do a raid on some island, go into an admin hut, find a hard drive. Is that going to be legitimate data or is it going to be false data? Generally false, because the time, effort, and planning to have false data interspersed with real data, most military intelligence organizations don't do that on base. They've got enough to worry about with the real classified data to have false data interspersed. This is mass dispersion of battlefield data, whereas if I would go out with the guys on a raid, get an iPhone, image it, get the target deck, where they've been, all that glorious data from the Knowledge C database, all their text messages, I can get more information doing iPhone forensics about an individual than I can doing human elicitation, face-to-face conversations. You just can't hide from the ones and zeros. That's, if you looked at my phone last night, you would see I walked about a mile past Governor's mansion on the beach, and then I ran back because I was caught in the rain. Glad to be here, don't get me wrong. But all that data is stored in the phone in a protected part of your, I would need a physical image of my phone to get that, but the data is still there. And if the nation state has it, they have time, effort, and the money to get the data. So you know the authenticity of this. Whereas this random stuff from Conti, is it real? These are things you have to consider when you're approaching this. It's a very esoteric niche thing, but it's becoming more common. Now the question was, who was Conti? Conti's gone. So we've got all this. The Carver method. Again, show of hands, anyone heard of this? Foreign military intelligence. If you're American, your tax dollars paid for this. Carver was developed in World War II to help the French resistance rank and identify key targets so that attacks could be more efficient. It's not software, definitely not. There's software out, you can pay for it, you can go to CarverCon, but you don't need that. It's a framework, basically a spreadsheet on how to identify the key data. The example, if I've got this right, and again, don't quote me, I believe it was the ball bearing factory in Dresden, and there's going to be someone on the YouTube comment saying, oh, he's wrong about this. They identified if we take out this key component of the ball bearing factory, then the German tanks, key components on submarines, warships, it immobilizes the war industry or the refineries here in this other city. If we don't have to hit the refinery and the ball bearing plant because if we take out this bridge or this railroad intersection, nothing can come out. It's immobilized for months. This is an easier target to get than the ball bearing plant. So this is a higher value target than the actual destruction of the factory. So it was something that could be done quickly, easily, but conversely, you can use this to identify what's key in your organization. And again, doing the speaker thing where I go over my talk a million times in my head before I get up here, the thought was what we consider our crown jewels may not be what you consider our crown jewels. And I'll show you what Conti considered. It's an actual acronym. U.S. government loves our acronyms. So it's criticality, accessibility, recoverability, vulnerability, effect, and recognizability. Carver, right? What's the most important job function? The key reason we're in business. If we lose X, what would happen to this? Could we recover from it? Now, starting to bring all the pieces together, an insider knows the key weaknesses of a system, just like the old meme of the modern world runs on an Excel 97 spreadsheet somewhere in Poughkeepsie, right? Well, we know if we delete that one spreadsheet, everything else collapses. I know from our organization, I'll get to this, I'm getting ahead of myself, we know that if X, Y, and Z were hit, the repercussions would be astronomical. We know that because we have guilty insider knowledge. The average attacker may or may not know that. You don't have to go through and rank all 6 criteria. Usually criticality and effect is enough. These are the most significant. If I take out X and Y, what happens? Again, going back to the movies, because I don't want to go to jail for discussing classified, Battle of Scarif. Well, if they take out this one shield generator over the planet, and now we can get signals out, we've taken out literally the firewall, then we can get data off planet, exfiltrate it, and then manipulate it to conduct a Carver attack on the Death Star because it's a 2-meter trench. We've all seen the movies, or you should have, being in cyber. So it's a scale 1 to 5 of least impact to most impact. So going across, it would be a total of 30 for the highest value, 5 for the lowest value. Again, the slides will be online. For Conti, as I ranked them, this is my personal opinion. This isn't, I am a former intelligence officer, this is how I saw it, is their crown jewels, their source code, their ransomware of how are we going to lock a system after reconnaissance was the most crucial thing. If they lose that and the cyber defenders, the blue team, know how to mitigate this risk, Conti won't operate. The other 5 in that stack are their core designers. You can get more creds. You can go on the dark web, whether it's, I believe it's Intel 471 or Recorded Future or any other threat vendors out there who troll the dark web looking for your org's creds. There's always more leaked creds out there. You can always get more creds. You can rebuild infrastructure. Not as robust. You're still going to have similar tradecraft to what you built before, but you can rebuild that. Staffing. Anybody know anyone who's looking for a job? Cyber is what, 1,000 applicants for every job opening? They can get more staff to run the actual ransomware and collect the data. But if you take out the devs and the source code, Conti doesn't run. So this is how I scored it. This is how I saw their biggest impact. What Conti considers their crown jewels are things I hadn't considered. I don't know everything. I know. Emails, address lists, so you can have the supply chain or the email reply attack. That's where you have a known good email and you reply to it. It gives you authenticity that you're part of the email chain when you're actually not. You're a third party. People assume you're part of the attack, part of the communication. Databases, there's no telling what you're going to find in any given database with hidden fields, deleted fields. The deleted fields in the SMS database on the iPhone revealed some pretty historical data that I didn't think would be recoverable, but it's still there from years ago. Obviously, the source code of any facility, any organization. Design documents, because if you know, hey, the backup server is here, but it's on an AWS bucket that isn't secured properly, well, we don't have to go after this, because again, their version of Carver, they're going after the AWS bucket that's unsecured. They still got the same data without the effort. That's an absolute win. Passwords, creds for other networks. Since I never said where I worked, we had a gentleman email our DLP software, data loss prevention software, caught him emailing 57 pairs of creds, username, password for all of his accesses to internal systems for data security. Why you need to do that when you freaking work at home? And again, you can take a picture with your iPhone, but these are the keys to the kingdom. Digital wallets, because if you have access to that, you've got access to more data. I'm limited with what I'm showing here for the actual data leak because it is true real-world data and lawsuits happen. Lawyers like to sue. I don't want to deal with that. So you can see, welcome to Wells Fargo, company ID, Pike 329. What that means, I don't know, but I could probably, hey, we're calling back about this from this vendor. Now you have the authenticity to go manipulate someone to load ransomware in your network. It leads into the phishing because people just generally don't click on random links. Aside from the one guy I work with who says, I click on it, see what happens. Yes, I'm talking about you. Was that a subtweet? So for my organization, I went through and ranked it. Excuse me. Our crown jewels, personally identifiable information. When you conduct a financial transaction with us, the volume of PII we have on you is similar to a background check for intelligence clearance. It's extremely comprehensive. It's something that if that was to get out for millions of people, we would lose the confidence of the United States public. We would go down, most of the economy would go down until this came back up. The infrastructure, how we process what we do. Our reputation, if we lose those three things, it's a major financial meltdown. Sorry. The effect if we lost our crown jewels and PII, astronomical. We can always get more creds, you can always create more usernames, password, you can always reset it. I know you've got, as I learned yesterday from Bo's presentation, you've got an hour before that token expires on O365. But you can always generate more creds. Staff, again, how many people in here are looking for work? There's always people looking for work. You can always get more employees. But if you lose your key components, your crown jewels, your infrastructure, and your reputation, we're out of business. Again, the slides will be up, but this is the basic framework. If you want to use this for your org, this works for offense or defense. And getting into, okay, we've got the data, we know what we consider sensitive, we know what they consider sensitive. The intelligence community defined intelligence as FINCA, foreign, of interest, new, clandestinely acquired, and authoritative. Basically, we don't want to pay a case officer to sit overseas in the Bahamas, read the newspaper, write up the newspaper article, and mail it home while he's getting, or she's getting, overseas pay, retirement pay to sit on the beach and type up the newspaper. That's not how an intelligence service generally works. In the cyber threat intelligence business, the joke was, Well, it's FINCA. We look for things financial industry of interest, new, copied and pasted from bleeping computer, and it's authoritative. It's similar, not quite the same, but close. Now, getting into the core of the presentation, these are the things when this data leak came out. The 4 questions. Are we targeted? That's the most important thing. Are we on the X? Is our core business function, is our industry a target for the ransomware group? Do we have any leaked credentials in the stack? And what other intelligence, CVEs, what are they using? What IOCs, what TTPs can we ascertain from the leak? But the first 3 are the most important. Again, apologies for this. Apple format PowerPoint. I'm an Apple guy wearing my Apple Polo from Apple headquarters. Around 87% of successful attacks are because of compromised accounts. So just going through these slides or going through the data and seeing we're not on the X, we don't have compromised accounts, and being able to tell the CISO and other C-level executives we're not on the X, invaluable. Again, apologies. So this is an older meme, but it checks out. Have y'all seen this or know? Have I just been on the internet too long? I've been on the internet since June of '90. I apologize. Type your credit card number in to see if you're in the hacker's database. Well, it's not, but it is now. You laugh, but again, we have jobs because of things we shouldn't have to deal with. Similar functions exist on the dark web. After learning what's on the dark web, I don't go on the dark web unless I have legal authority and a badge to say if you see something you shouldn't, you're not going to jail for it. There's enough stuff out there. I'm not doing that for fun. There were dark websites when the dark web came up that had, hey, if you're an intelligence officer, visit this site and see if your asset, see if your pseudonym, the asset crypt or location or collection tools. Let's type it in and see if it's compromised. It's never in there, and all they're doing is harvesting your data, just like Google or Apple or Facebook is collecting it, but it's more for nefarious purposes. So we're not going to take this corporate data, or the Conti leak, and run it on the corporate laptop. There we go. So like goes after like. In the military, they would say, troops go after troops, tanks kill tanks, subs kill subs, airplanes kill airplanes. You get the idea. So in the threat intelligence role, we're looking for the immediate actionable intelligence of what is the direct threat to the organization, to our industry. The intrusion detection team, incident response team, what malware do they have? How can we identify the signatures? Can we write YAR rules for this? What do we need to update? What have we not considered that could be of risk? For insider threat, it's more of, okay, here's a case study of what went wrong, even though what the person did was fantastic. It was a noble deed, leaking the data. It was still an insider threat, and we can still learn lessons to make our organization better. So credentials, that was the biggest thing to sift through. Very common passwords, passwords 1, 2, 3, 4, baloney, baloney 1 with an exclamation point, 2 exclamation points, summer 2022, the basics. Password managers are breached from Chrome. So even though you've got these long, fancy password managers, if you have the different infoware stealers, you're still breached. But again, for the purpose of this talk, posting other people's PII here for an international talk leads to hiring attorneys. Sharing PII leads to open to work, and then I'm leaning on my Star Wars eBay sales store for revenue, and I'd be homeless. Nobody wants Star Wars stuff. Again, just to show you a little bit of the volume of creds, it was exhaustive. So rather than doing the diamond model to explain, anybody ever draw this in elementary school? Yeah? I freaking wanted to use it once in my career, so this is the diamond model. Conti wouldn't just go for phishing to get to the target organization. They used creds, compromised creds. They used vulnerabilities, spear phishing. They'd then pivot to spear phishing, and then the best one they'd do is typo squats. So they have 5 different methods to come after an organization. holy cow, this next slide is just, it's going to be special. Well, basically, we're going to move to a prettier slide, and I'll just talk over that one. It's text data, okay? I've downloaded it to an out-of-band laptop. It's not on the corporate laptop. One, because I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's malware. I don't know if it's, I don't say CSAM, because it's all text, but I don't want it on the corporate network. That's how breaches happen. That's how malware gets loaded. Again, I like my job. I don't want to lose my job assuming. Never assume. So out-of-band laptop, not my personal, because again, I don't want to leak my personal data for the sake of the organization. So I have a sterile laptop just to look at this. However you look at text files, whether you load it into forensic tools, command line interface, notepad, I really don't. It doesn't matter how you do it, it just matters what you do. Because do you want to assume this data is not going to get you fired? I keep reiterating that, but that's a key thing because people make mistakes. So we've got two machines running, corporate machine, out-of-band laptop, and communication is key. In Teams chat, God kill me. Open a JIRA ticket too. Have a meeting about your JIRA ticket. But we have the data, we're parsing it. That goes out to the leadership team. Immediately, its organization name is not targeted. Our partner organizations who do similar functions to us, they're not on the X. But when you do that search for that corporation name, you're also searching that database, that list for creds too, because the @companyname.com is still going to be there. And that's a pretty fast search. We're not on the X. We are not on the compromised credential list. So right now, it's 88% coverage. Not to put too much into compliance and metrics, that's a really good start to immediately take this leaked database of files and say, we look pretty good so far. That's a good win. The next were the phishing templates. We can get those over, export those, get those to our detection team to write YAR rules to filter those out so that we're now mitigated against possible spear phishing. IOCs, domain names, we're starting to get, the immediate threat is bleeding off. So domain names, possible C2 sites, we're getting that in, sorry. Looks like I picked the wrong week to get smoking. Airplane. Am I showing my age? So the IP, sorry, the IP addresses, man, I don't know what this is. IP addresses and URLs go into anomaly, those go into your detection, those get blocked. We're now starting to shut down any hook that Conti is going to have into our system. As for sharing the IOC TTPs with an ISAC, information sharing organization has to go through legal, has to go through regulatory. That takes attorneys, that takes a long time. We can start that process later after done with the data, but we'll get to it. Last was the vulnerabilities. This is about 10% of the attacks according to CISA. Very well organized through the 2015 all the way to 2021, the different vulns they had that they wanted to execute, and not just the vulns. It's anyone worked with vulnerability teams. Patching a large enterprise system isn't like updating your iPhone, it's a lengthy process. Not only do they have the vulns listed for each organization, they had how to use the vuln with YouTube tutorials for each operator. So you've opened all right, I'm going to discuss meetings. You're going to have a JIRA ticket, and a Teams meeting, and a Confluence page, and a Resilient ticket, all to discuss patching CVE 2019-1385. And by the time we get done having the meeting and completing the JIRA ticket about the meeting, and closing that ticket and tying that JIRA ticket back to the parent-child ticket, and then tying that back to the main T-shirt size, and then giving the pickle order. Now, I'm not making this stuff up, that's part of JIRA. Well, we're worried about compliance and documentation. The ransomware team, okay, this doesn't work, doesn't work, doesn't work. We're in, just like in the movies. They have a lot more flexibility and speed to penetrate an organization. So that's something to bring back is This isn't a process like an energy organization. I don't want to say it because I like having power and water where I work or where I live, but it's not a year-long process to patch a vuln. They're moving very quickly to penetrate and take down a company. So typo squats, instead of, just for a little overview, instead of saying Kimpton.com, it would be KIRNON.com. It looks very similar. If you just glance at it, it looks like Kimpton. Same for Bank of America. The R and the N would be a typo squat. So unless your org has a script written, I have a brilliant engineer on my team. He wrote a script for this to look for all the variants of our corporation name with regex against the WHOIS registry. So every day we know what the latest typo squat attempt for us would look like, so that can get blocked. We don't get phishing emails. Customers are unaware, they're never impacted by this. It's a good thing to look at if your organization isn't doing it. But again, this is something the ransomware group is looking at. The tertiary analysis would be their operational tempo. We've discussed that. Methodology used to discover and exploit the target machines, their workflow, their chain of command. And this is fun. I love doing this type of work. But for my private sector commercial role, hey, that was 2 years ago that this leaked. We're worried about today's insider threat, not what happened 2 years ago. Let's focus on this. So we've got about 5 minutes left. This would be, again, one of the exercises of after action. How could this have been identified? How could we reverse engineer the source code? How could we pivot on the usernames, the Bitcoin addresses, the targeted firms and industries? I would go to a namecheck.com, again, part of it's linked from osintframework.com, and see if there's any fragment of their username to see what else would be out there that they may be in other target decks to see where else the organization is. Tertiary analysis, they've got advice on how to leave backdoors on the domain controller, where the intrusion team would look for the domain controller, how to bypass that. So the main hacking tool is Cobalt Strike. If we know how to mitigate Cobalt Strike, then we're doing pretty good to stop Conti. But again, this is something that came out months after the leak. This is what Conti would go after: cybersecurity policies, cyber insurance. How much is going to get paid out? Do they have supplementing insurance? Who's underwriting this and what terms? That's what they're looking for. Is if I take down your organization with ransomware, how much can we get? Okay, if I can take down your org for 25 million and your org for 50, but you don't have insurance, yours does and you're just going to pay out faster, I'll go after the 50. I've never considered that as a threat of something that an outside org would look at till I did this research. You don't want to assume someone's going to do the work for you, because VX Underground does amazing work, but this was uploaded June of 2023, a year and a half after the leak. So I'm not going to wait for my org to download from VX Underground to see if we're on the X when I can process this myself, the steps previously described. They do have compliance. They went to this website. They had to enumerate, hey, this isn't something illicit. This is actually the name of a real company. They had expelled, so even the Russian ransomware groups have HR to make sure you're not doing anything spicy on your computer. So the TLDR, secure your own organization first, then help others. Document the data as you find it. You don't want to cross the same fence twice. Using Carver methodology doesn't require proprietary software. There's no licensing, there's no fees, there's no ISC2A fees due. It's a framework. It's not hardcore technical like the other talks, but it's the mindset you're bringing when you process the data. So the next steps on this, I was speaking at DEF CON on voting machine forensics, and one of the organizers asked if Conti ever targeted the US elections. Still have the data. I could go back and say, no, they hadn't. At the time, I wasn't concerned about US elections. I was concerned about my employer. Another thing, Bumblebee ransomware uses domain generating algorithms for C2. Dig Conti, that's something you can go back and look at. But you never assume someone else has done the work, because you might be the only person to consider it. Has Georgetown been targeted by Conti? I don't know. Look yourself and never assume that the data is going to be online. Last, let's see if this animation works. This works on a Mac. This is a great way to pull metadata. So download a PDF. Again, it's very rudimentary, but it's extracting some OSINT. We download a PDF, it's a random PDF. Open a terminal in Mac, MDLS, metadata list. Here's the hard step. You drag it, drop it, hit enter. And it's going to give the metadata list of who wrote the document or ostensibly wrote the document, the date it was created, what platform it was used, and that's going to give you insider information. So if you do something like this with iMessage, if you don't strip your metadata out, you can get what phone, the GPS, the picture where it was taken, the Photoshop software used to manipulate it, what angle, what camera was taken, what camera is used for the photo, which way they're facing the GPS coordinates, all from this simple MDLS list that's free with your Mac on terminal. Last, again, if Conti is worried about the mental health awareness of their cybersecurity operators, take care of your health because no one else will take care of you except for yourself. If the Russian criminals can do that, you've got to take care of yourself too. Last question, 10 seconds left. Thumbs up, thumbs down. If you're Russia bad guys, do you remove the insider threat? Yes or no, before you invade Ukraine? Yeah? Make it farm friendly, final and fire. Hey, we appreciate your time. Here's $2 million. Thank you for your service. We're sending you and your wife to Waikiki for 6 weeks. Enjoy your vacation. He's gotten well paid out. He's off the X. He's not associated with it. He's happy, and you remove the threat. Conti is still operating. Or if you leave him, then it leads to talks at conferences like this. So time is up. That went by quickly, for me at least. Do we have a minute or two for questions?
We don't.